I always need the reminder, and it's done. We have a goodly number of people here. There may still be coming, but
that's great.
Yeah. So I think we'll get started, and I thank you for those of you that brought your lunch. It does make it feel like a lunch and learn when you're actually eating, and it doesn't bother me at all to see you. So enjoy that. We have a lot of people off screen. I want to welcome all of you. We have a lot of guests here today. Some are friends of Brad. I think that's a whole group in the community, FOB, Friends of Brad.
What is that, Robert?
And quite a few people that saw this presentation, perhaps in the Ann Arbor Observer. We want to welcome you. I will ask you when we begin to mute yourself. I'm not sure how Phil will handle questions along the way, but he can tell us that. If you do want to ask something, you'll want to unmute yourself. You can also use the chat feature, and I'll be looking for that. I will be scrolling as well when we get to Q&A, looking for hands that might be raised like this. There's also a hand raising function if you go to reactions in the bottom of your bar there, and you can hit the hand raising function, and we'll try to get to everybody today. I know there'll be a lot to talk about, but why don't we begin with a word of prayer? Shall we pray? O God of majesty, of miracles, of small graces and great gifts, we thank you for all the ways you bless us in our lives with beauty, with history, with storytelling, with wisdom, with places to go and people to see, and new memories to make. As we revisit our own memories of Mackinac Island today within ourselves, and as we share today together as a community of faith, we thank you for the faith you have in us to traverse this strange landscape of pandemic, to be together in this way, and to hold each other close, and to reach out beyond this time to our friends and neighbors, to welcome them to our church. For all are welcome here, and we want all to be a part. All this we ask through our Lord. Amen. Brad, I'll turn it over to you and ask us to mute ourselves.
Presbyterian seniors, friends of Brad, friends of Mel, and just friends of Phil that are here. Welcome. It's a pleasure being with you today. This presentation has been a long time in the planning. Phil was initially scheduled to speak to us a year ago this time. And of course, we lost a number of church activities due to COVID. But he agreed to come back and talk to us over Zoom this year. Ideally, we'd have him in the church social hall, sharing SpaghettiOs and bologna sandwiches with us at a lunch and learn there. But instead we get virtual Phil, which is a pretty good thing. Let me tell you a little bit about our speaker today. Phil Porter is the executive director emeritus of Mackinac State Historic Parks. And I think when many of us think about Mackinac Island, we think of the fort and we think of Grand Hotel. But there's much more to that. And Phil's organization was responsible for the operation of a number of museums on the island, including the fort, the nature trails on the island, and the wilderness area on the island, and an airport on the island. He's the only museum director that I've ever met who'd had direct responsibility for operating an airport. Phil's academic background is really impressive. He's a graduate of the Cooperstown Graduate Program in upstate New York. It's sort of the gold standard for folks in the museum field. And as I understand it, Phil, you'll correct me if I've got this wrong, but Phil's first job out of graduate school was on Mackinac Island, and he's been on the island pretty much ever since. A very long tenure there.
That's true.
Phil and I have known each other for about 20 years through our work in the museum field. We'd connect with each other, every other year or so at a museum conference, or when he came down to Ann Arbor to visit his kids who were students at the university and talk to my graduate classes. And it seemed like for the past 10 years, every time we got together, we'd talk about who was going to retire. And within the past 6 months, both of us have retired. So we've got other stuff to talk about going forward, Phil. It's a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you for sharing your retirement with us and for telling us about Mackinac Island today. Let's give a good first pres welcome to Phil Porter.
Yay!
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Bradley, for those kind words. It's a pleasure to be with you today and to share Mackinac's rich history. And if I can get this going here, well, you should be ready to go. All right, can we all see that?
Yes.
Is that okay? Okay, great. Well, again, thank you for inviting me to share words about Mackinac Island with you all today. It's great to see you all. It's great to see some familiar faces. I want to especially give a shout out to Meg Brown, who was one of the commissioners of the Mackinac Island State Park Commission for several years, and it was her responsibility, along with her fellow commissioners, to oversee the staff that took care of the island, its natural and historic wonders. So we're always appreciative to those who provided leadership in achieving what we've done there. You know, Mackinac has a very long and rich and fascinating history. It is a place that is today the way it was centuries ago. Very busy in the summer and very quiet in the winter. It's been always a summer gathering place. And it's attracted Indians and missionaries, soldiers and summer tourists, fur traders and fishermen, and their experiences all weave together to create a fascinating fabric of history that we call the heritage of Mackinac. Now, it would take me several days to really give you the whole story of Mackinac, and we have less than an hour today. So I'm going to try and move this along pretty quickly and try to share this rich history with you in less than 6 words. Now, I'll say more than 6 words, but if you can remember these 6 words that all begin with the letter F, they're all F words, they're all clean F words, you will know the basic outline of Mackinac history. We're gonna take a quick romp through Mackinac history, and if you remember these 6 words, you will be an expert of Mackinac history. The first word is faith, and it really deals with the earliest settlement of Mackinac Island. Of course, the earliest people to Mackinac were the Native Americans. These were semi-nomadic people who traveled around the Great Lakes, different times of the year, where they could find food. In the winter, they went south and inland and hunted. In the spring, they came north, and by summer, they were on Mackinac Island and throughout the Straits of Mackinac, fishing for lake trout and whitefish. But they especially revered Mackinac Island because it was and still is today a very sacred place in their tradition. According to their traditions, after the Great Flood, the first piece of land on earth was created by Gitche Manitou, and it was the island of Michela, Mackinac. And it was here that he put mankind back onto Mackinac, and from there they spread to the rest of the world. And so Mackinac was then and still is today very sacred to Native people. In fact, every summer we have a group of Native American women who come to Mackinac Island. It's a retreat. It's grandmothers, daughters, and granddaughters, and they come here as a spiritual retreat. And they come to Mackinac specifically because it is a place that is so important to their faith tradition. Now, because there were Native Americans here, it attracted the first Europeans, and they too came for a faith reason. They were Jesuit missionaries who came into this area to bring Christianity to the Native Americans. And Father Jacques Marquette and Claude de Blanc established a mission on Mackinac Island in the winter of 1670 and 71. Keep in mind that that's 350 years ago. They settled there. So they too came for a faith reason and brought with them the Christian faith that of course we still have in this area today, and we still have the church that they established. They soon moved off of Mackinac to the north side of the Straits, where they established a permanent mission. They moved that mission to the south side of the Straits by 1715, and here they eventually constructed a church that they named in honor of St. Anne, and that church was moved to Mackinac Island during the American Revolutionary War, and its descendant church, St. Anne's, is still on the island today, and they trace their history back 350 years to Marquette and de Blanc, who established that church on Mackinac Island. Now, at the same time or soon after the Jesuits came, another group of Frenchmen came, and they came not to convert the Indians, but to do business with them. And that was the business of the fur trade. And that, of course, brings us to our second F word. The fur trade was the dominant industry of the Upper Great Lakes for almost 200 years. It was the business of the Great Lakes. It was the reason for settlement, for building forts, for having battles to fight over the area. Fur trade was the dominant industry, and Mackinac was in the center and a very important part of the fur trade. The fur trading took place on an annual basis, and it began every winter with a Native American men doing the trapping. They trapped during the winter because that's when the furs were the thickest, the most valuable. The Native American women prepared the hides for trading, and a lot of different animals were traded in the fur trade. There was mink and marten and otter and bear and fox and raccoon, badger, but none of the animals that was trapped and traded was as popular as this little fellow, and that, of course, is his beaver. And that's because beaver pelt and beaver hair was used to make beaver felt, which was used to make hats in Europe. All the way from 17th century tri-corner hats to 19th century top hats. Gentlemen of fashion wore hats made out of beaver fur. And so that was so important to the fur trade industry, and that was the dominant fur that flowed through Mackinac. Now, the furs that came to Mackinac came from a vast region, from Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, up into Minnesota and the Canadian provinces. But you couldn't get a canoe full of furs from the wilderness to Montreal, where they were being shipped to Europe, in one navigation season. The waters would freeze up and the ice would make it impassable. So there had to be a summer depot or transshipment point where they could get the furs to, and they could be picked up at the same time. That, of course, was the Straits of Mackinac. Furs flowed from this vast region down the rivers to Mackinac, and here the furs were collected by the voyageurs who came from Montreal and then taken back to the East Coast, and the traders went back into the wilderness for another winter of trading. And this happened time and time and time again. Now, the fur trade was extremely lucrative. The country that had control of the fur trade had control of a very, very lucrative business. And so in order to protect the fur trade, all the countries that settled there built forts, our next F word. So we have faith, furs, and to protect the fur trade, we have forts. The first fort was built in St. Ignace when that was the center of the French settlement there. That was a short-lived fort and eventually moved to the south side of the Straits, where the French built Fort Michela, which has now been reconstructed in 1715. We call it a fort, but it's more than a fort. It had soldiers inside, but it was really a walled community, much like in Europe, where you have walled communities inside with the military, but also the families, the people involved with the fur trade. It was a community surrounded by a palisade wall. The French maintained control of Michilimackinac until the end of the French and Indian, or the 7 Years' War. In 1761, the British had been victorious, and what was New France became British Canada, and British soldiers marched into Michilimackinac and took over. Under their control, the fur trade boomed, it expanded, and the community expanded well beyond the walls of the fort. But then, in the winter of 1780 and 81, the British dismantled the fort. They took it down piece by piece and moved it across the ice out to Mackinac Island and rebuilt the fort up on the hill here that overlooks the fine natural harbor of Mackinac Island. Now you got to wonder, why in the world would the British move the fort in the middle of the winter in 1780 from one desolate, isolated location out to an island which was even more isolated? Well, the reason was the American Revolutionary War. When the war broke out, the British commander in charge of Michilimackinac was scared to death that he would be attacked by Americans. And so he decided to move the fort to the island to take advantage of this hill and have a much safer, more naturally defensible location. And the fort still stands today. It is a National Historic Landmark. It's one of the very few Revolutionary War sites in the entire Midwest, certainly in Michigan, and it's really one of the great gems of our state and of Mackinac Island. Now, when they moved the fort from the mainland out to the island, they separated the civilian community from the military. The soldiers lived up on the hill here in the fort, and the community lived down below. And the way that the island was laid out, you can see here, is still the way the downtown area is laid out today. It really hasn't changed. The fort's up on the hill. Downtown, you have a main street along the water. You have the Market Street right behind. And originally, to protect the community, they built a palisaded wall all the way around the outside of the community. That was designed to protect the community from any potential attack. What's fascinating is that this back wall right here, the north wall, there's still a fence on that exact line today. It's no longer a 20-foot wooden palisade designed to keep cannonballs and musket balls out. It is now a cyclone fence that's designed to keep out golf balls, because that is the Grand Hotel Golf Course. Used to be a large open pasture. Now it's a large open golf course. So again, the basic lines of Mackinac have not really changed since it was laid out during the American Revolutionary War. Now, as you all well know, the Americans won the Revolution, and as a result of that, what was British Canada became the United States. This part of British Canada became the United States, and American soldiers marched in. When the British left, however, they didn't go very far. They went just about 40 miles north, just inside Canadian waters, to the island of St. Joseph, and there they built Fort St. Joseph, and they patiently waited for a chance to attack and recapture and regain control of Fort Mackinac. Because control of Fort Mackinac meant control of the Straits of Mackinac, control of the fur trade, and the opportunity to develop and maintain effective alliances with the Native Americans, who during this time were always the dominant population. Well, the British didn't have to wait very long, because in 1812, war once again broke out between the United States and America and Great Britain. And the very first land battle on US territory of the War of 1812 was the British recapture of the fort. You see, the British at Fort St. Joseph heard about the outbreak of the war before the Americans at Fort Mackinac did. And when they heard about it, they very quickly put together their soldiers and a group of about 500 Native American allies, sailed around to the back of the island, dragged 2 6-pound cannon with them through the island. And as the sun rose the next morning on July 17th, 1812, they fired a warning shot over the top of Fort Mackinac. That warning shot was the first time that the Americans in the fort even knew that war had been declared. The American commanded that day about 60 soldiers in the fort, and there was about 80 soldiers and about 500 Native Americans behind the Fudge at the time, named in honor of. Well, 2 years later, in 1814, when the American
Phil's internet is apparently unstable, so he has lost his connection. We're going to wait and see if he can come back on. I was trying to send him a message about that when he disappeared, so let's hope he can come back and we can try again. Thank you all for your patience.
While we try to get Phil back,
Here he comes.
yep.
I'm back. I think the British soldiers stole my connection there for a minute.
All right.
Okay, sorry for the I don't know what happened. So the American soldiers landed on the north end of the island. They marched to a clearing that was a farm, and there they were met by the British, who defeated them in a very short and very decisive victory for the British, defeat for the Americans. They went back to their boat, sailed back to Detroit, and gave up any hope of trying to capture the fort during the war. But 1 year later, when the war was over, the peace treaty transferred all property that had been captured to its prior owner. And that's how the United States finally got Fort Mackinac. And we've been able to hold it ever since that time. After the War of 1812, John Jacob Astor established the Northern Department headquarters of the fur trade on Mackinac Island. So the fur trade that had begun by the French, continued by the British, was now dominated by John Jacob Astor and the American Fur Company. And these buildings along Market Street here were the center of his operation. And during the 1820s, millions of dollars worth of furs flowed through Mackinac on their way to New York, Astor's hometown. And these furs from Mackinac helped to make Astor this country's first millionaire. This is Mackinac Island as it looked in the late 1830s, which was a time of dramatic change because the fur trade finally died out. The fur-bearing animals were being trapped out. European fashions were changing from fur hats to silk hats. And so the fur trade moved off of Mackinac Island to the West Coast and continued to diminish over the years. Mackinac Island went into a bit of an economic depression, but it was revived by a new industry, not furs anymore, but a new natural resource, and that was fish. So we have faith, furs, forts, and now fish. And fishing was the dominant industry in the middle part of the 19th century in Mackinac Island. Fishermen like this gentleman for about 100 miles around brought their catch to Mackinac Island in these sturdy Mackinac boats, primarily lake trout and whitefish. And it was a booming business that sent tons and tons of fish every year down lake to Chicago and Detroit and other places. And Mackinac became well known, especially for its whitefish. This is the town of Mackinac as it appeared during the fishing era. You can see right here is a fish drying net, net wheel. They would dry the nets on there. And you can see all the docks that were built to accommodate the fishing boats that came in. But soon after this, people began to come to Mackinac Island for a different reason, not for furs, not for fish, but for fun. And that is the era that we're still in today. It's the era of Mackinac Island as a summer resort. Following the American Civil War, there was an astonishing growth in resort communities across the United States and Canada. There was this post-war desire to escape from the emotional tragedy of the nation being torn against itself at war for 5 years, and the escape from rapidly industrializing American cities. So during the summer, those who could afford to on the East Coast, from Washington and Baltimore and New York, went up into New England and found their summer homes there, Cape Cod and Kennebunkport and Newport, and Martha's Vineyard. Their counterparts in the Midwest came to the upper Great Lakes. And of all the places they came to, none was quite as special as Mackinac Island. Mackinac had really three things to draw and attract and sustain a tourism audience. First of all, great natural beauty. These fantastic limestone formations like Arch Rock and Sugarloaf and Devil's Kitchen, beautiful views over the Straits of Mackinac, towering pine forests, just a very beautiful place. Besides natural beauty, it was a place that even after the Civil War already boasted historic charm. It was a place where Native Americans roamed and where voyageurs traded and where fur traders met and British and American soldiers fought. Besides historic charm and natural beauty, it was also a place that boasted a healthy environment, a place where people could come to get away from various ailments. And before you could take medicines for these things, people used to have to travel to get away from hay fever and so on. And Mackinac was renowned for having cool, clean, fresh air and cool, clean water. And people would come north and they would drink the water and they'd breathe the air. And this is the kind of behavior that would take place. Scandalous. Well, Mackinac became so popular so quickly that the federal government decided to step in and do something to preserve Mackinac from overdevelopment. And that's when, in 1875, they created Mackinac National Park, the country's second national park. Only Yellowstone predated Mackinac as a national reserve. And that shows you how early on Mackinac was identified as a place of national historic significance. And the creation of the national park really helped to popularize the island. And so hordes of people began to come on boats and on trains. And so a number of resort hotels developed. One of the earliest was the Mission House, which was in the 1820s a Presbyterian mission to Native American and Métis children living in the area. By the 1840s, when the fur trade died out, the mission closed, and the house was purchased by the Franks family and turned into the earliest and first large hotel on the island. Other hotels from the early period include the Island House, built by Charles O'Malley in 1852. O'Malley was the first of many Irish immigrants who came to Mackinac Island in the middle part of the 19th century. And then the Lakeview House Hotel was also built around the same time. But again, after the Civil War, more and more people start to come. The railroads are bringing them up. The passenger steamboats are bringing them up, and there aren't enough hotel rooms to accommodate everybody. And so in 1887, the Grand Hotel was built. It was actually built by 3 transportation companies who pooled their funds together to build the hotel to take care of their boat and train customers. What's fascinating is that the boats and trains are long gone, but the hotel still remains. The hotel was built in the spring and early summer of 1887 by a local contractor from Harbor Springs. His name was Charles Caskey, and Caskey had a reputation for being a very rapid builder. It is a reputation that he enhanced when he built the Grand Hotel because he used 300 men and he built the hotel in less than 4 months.
Jeez.
If anybody's trying to like remodel their kitchen or get a deck built, you know, you can't get anything done in 4 months. He had that entire hotel built, and it was an immediate success, and it transformed Mackinac Island and had a huge impact on its eventual growth and its popularity. But not everybody was happy staying in a hotel, even one as lovely and luxurious as the Grand. And so for these people, nothing less than having their own summer place on Mackinac Island would do. And so a number of resort communities developed, cottage communities developed, and Mackinac became a very popular place for people to build summer cottages. The early summer cottages looked like this. They were relatively small, modest affairs, but this kind of simplicity and modesty was replaced by opulence in the 1880s and 90s. And the reason for the change was the construction and success of the Grand Hotel. The Grand Hotel transformed Mackinac from being just another summer place in the Upper Great Lakes to being the most popular, the most fashionable place. And so people of great wealth started to come to Mackinac. They brought their bags of money and they brought their architects, and they designed these palatial summer cottages or summer mansions. And it really is quite a wonderful collection of summer architecture from the late 19th century. But what happened is that these large ornate homes went in right next to small, modest homes. And so we have this remarkable phenomenon of homes that are no more than 4 or 5 or 6 years old being torn down or substantially remodeled to keep up with what their neighbor had just built right next door. Here's an example. This cottage was built by Frank Clark of Kalamazoo in 1886, 1 year before the Grand Hotel, a very lovely summer home. 6 years after he built it, though, it was sold to DeLoss Blodgett, and DeLoss Blodgett was a very wealthy lumberman from Grand Rapids. The Grand Hotel had been built in the meantime, and he was not satisfied with the style or the size of the house, so he had it the front porch the front part of it entirely ripped down and added this
You've broken up again.
massive new
Paul, Phil,
queen.
you've broken up
Yeah.
again.
Phil, we're losing you again.
Addition to it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's going in and out. And Phil, I think if you turn off your video, that might help with your internet. We can still see what you're presenting, but we won't be able to see you. But that might help with your unstable internet.
Okay, let's give that a try.
So I think I can do that for you. Hold on. There we go.
Okay, are we back?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry again for the delay. If you missed anything, again, this cottage was remodeled to become this cottage in order to keep what their neighbor was doing, again, because of the construction of the Grand Hotel and its major impact on making Mackinac such a fashionable resort. This house is still at the top of the West Bluff today. It's actually for sale if anybody is interested, somewhere around $3 million. This is Mackinac's most famous summer cottage. It was built in 1902 for Lawrence Young of Chicago. Lawrence Young was a very wealthy attorney in that town. He hired Patrick Dowd, a local contractor, to build the house for the cost of $15,000. Patrick Dowd was the great uncle of Margaret Dowd, who is our current mayor and has been the mayor of Mackinac Island for about the last 45 years. That house was sold to the state of Michigan in 1945 for the same price it was built, $15,000. And ever since that time, it has been the executive summer residence of the governor of the state of Michigan. And we've had governors who haven't minded leaving office, leaving the politics and everything. But after staying on Mackinac, they had a really hard time of leaving Mackinac. So they had to leave the house. But Soapy Williams, Governor G. Menon Williams, came back and lived on the West Bluff for 25 years. And William Milliken, who just passed away in the last couple of years, lived in Hubbard's Annex for an equal period of time. They fell in love with Mackinac from having the opportunity to stay in the house. Well, downtown changed as well. Not only did the bluffs change, but after Mackinac became a summer resort, things in town changed. The docks were no longer waiting for fishing boats. They were waiting for ferry boats loaded with tourists. The old fur company office became a hotel, and the fishing shanties became curio shops and confectionaries. And you know what they make in confectionaries, don't you? That's right. That's our 6F, and that is fudge. So we have faith, furs, forts, fish, fun, and Mackinac for over 100 years has been known for its fudge. The fudge story came to Mackinac as a result of the Grand Hotel as well. They hired a man named Henry Murdoch to come to Mackinac Island, and he had two skills. One was that he was a sailmaker for sailboats, and so he was hired to make all of the candies for Grand Hotel. His second skill that he shared with his wife and his son was as candy makers. They made candy makers in a number of towns, including most recently Petoskey. And after being on Mackinac Island and building the Grand Hotel, he thought, well, maybe this is the place to open our candy shop. And in 1889, he opened Murdoch's Candy Kitchen. You can see the sign right here. That little building on the left is the first fudge shop on Mackinac Island. Now, they made lots of different kinds of candies. They made pulled taffy, and they made chocolate kisses, and they made dipped chocolates and brittle, all kinds of candy, but none was as popular as fudge because of the fascinating process of watching it being made. They'd pour out 35 pounds of molten candy onto a large slab and work it into a final shape. It was very dramatic and very exciting to watch, and people wanted to buy the candy they had just seen being made. In fact, by the 1920s, Murdoch is advertising, come and see Murdoch make his famous fudge. It's not come and taste it. It's not come and buy it. It's come and watch him make it, because he knows if you watch the process, you'll buy the product. And that's exactly what happened. Well, many other fudge makers joined the process over time. And in 1960, a gentleman named Harry Ryba came to Mackinac, and he really was a master marketeer. His fudge was just as good as anybody else. No, not any better, but he knew how to market it. The first thing he did was he took the fudge making process from the back of the shop, so he didn't have to come inside, out to the front window. So people walking down the street would stop, and they could now watch this fascinating process from being outside. And then he was even more clever than that. He would take the sweet smell of fudge and then pump it out onto the street through fans. So you were standing there watching the fudge being made, smelling the fudge being made, and pretty soon you were like Pavlov's dog. You were inside buying the fudge that was just being made. And it was a great success. And again, fudge and Mackinac have been inextricably linked for many, many decades, almost over a century. It's really quite fascinating. There are about 5 or 6 fudge makers on the island. There's about 12 or 15 shops. They're all in these quaint little down-home places, but don't be fooled. It is a multi-million-dollar, very successful business. This is Fort Mackinac in 1895. The 1890s was a decade of great change on Mackinac Island. The fort was abandoned by the soldiers. The Army decided it was time to move their soldiers out of a fort that was basically in the middle of a park. And so the national government was ready to shut down or sell Mackinac National Park. And that's when the state of Michigan stepped in to our great fortune, and they created Mackinac Island State Park. It went right from being a national park to a state park in 1895, and 83% of the island remains a state park today, which is so important to its ongoing preservation. That, along with something that happened 3 years later, are the two most important things that happened to Mackinac Island, and that was the auto ban. In 1898, a young man brought an automobile on a boat to Mackinac Island. He boat onto the dock, from the dock up onto the main street, and right into the middle of a lot of horses. And those horses were scared to death. And very quickly, the city fathers got together, and the city council voted in 1898 to ban horseless carriages. And it's, again, along with creating the parks, it's the most important thing that happened to Mackinac, because cars were banned before they could change the natural layout of the island. We still have narrow, quaint, historic streets. We still have lots of horses that are being used. We have no garages. We have no gas stations. We have no stoplights. We have no stop signs. We have no smell of cars, no sound of cars. We have a different smell, but it's historic and part of the charm of Mackinac Island. Well, Mackinac continues to be today very much the way it was centuries ago, a place that's very busy in the summer and very quiet in the winter. This summer, we expect to have between 800,000 and 900,000 people if we can really recover from this COVID thing. In the winter, a population of about 500. It's just a remarkable a change, but it's been that way since the native people came here centuries ago. The people on the island will continue to take boats to the mainland until the ice freezes, and that's when they have the fun time of the year. That's when they ride their snowmobiles from the back of the island over to the mainland, to St. Ignace, and it's a really great time of the year because you can come and go anytime of day or night, and it's usually pretty safe. And that concludes my presentation. And again, all I want you to remember out of all of this is 6 words: faith, furs, forts, fish, fun, and fudge. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
I'm sorry for the fading. It's good to know that I can in future talks I can shut down my video and hopefully save my bandwidth.
You can only learn that through really long staff meetings, so I hope you haven't had any of those.
Yeah, I'm done with those. Right, Brad?
Right.
So would you take questions, Phil?
I'd be very happy to take them, and I'm trying to see if I can get them from chat, or will you read them from chat, Mel?
I will, if we can stop the sharing, I'll have a better look at people. So I'm going to do that.
Okay.
And then I'll be looking for hands or the hand raising function, or just unmute yourself and belt it out, and we'll have a cacophony of goodness. Any questions here? Anyone with questions? I'm looking.
I wonder if Meg Brown has ever been there.
Where is Meg? She's here. I know she's here. Questions for Phil? Questions about the Mackinac Island presentation? Are you planning to go? Are you going with us next year? Meg, there you are.
I sure am. Love to go. Love to have an excuse to get back home. It's one of my homes. We lived on Mackinac. I lived on it year round for 8 years. And Paul lived on Mackinac Island really to 17 years. So we've gotten to know the island very well. And I want you to tell me where everybody is in your family. Would that be all right? I know that's not quite but we want to know, Phil. How's everybody doing? Yes.
My family, Meg?
Yeah, where are all the kids?
Last Saturday, I had my 10th grandchild. I didn't have it, my daughter did, but we have 5 children, 1 in LA, 1 in Detroit, 2 in Grand Rapids, and 1 has moved in with us because her husband is now able to work remotely, moving to Sheboygan and looking to live in Northern Michigan. But 10 grandchildren, 5 boys and 5 girls, and we couldn't be more blessed.
Oh,
Congratulations on your new one.
Yeah.
Margaret Sinclair.
Great.
It's wonderful. Sandra McDonald has a question. Sandra.
This is a very high level question. I'm asking because I'm coming actually to Mackinac near the end of the month with a friend who's coming up from Atlanta. So I'm pretty excited about that. However, the really important world-changing question is, of the existing fudge shops, which one would you recommend?
I don't go there. They're all outstanding and excellent. And I have many friends and even family members who own and work at these places. You can't go wrong with any of them.
Okay.
The only thing I would say is there is one establishment that doesn't make it on the slab. They cook it in an oven, and they make good fudge. It's the Murray Hotel, but I would buy the slab made fudge because that's really the traditional Mackinac fudge.
Thank you.
Sandra, let me know if you're taking orders before the end of the month.
I absolutely am taking orders.
Mary Steffi Blasky asked Phil if you were in the movie Somewhere in Time.
I wasn't. I had the great fortune. I was working for the organization at the time. I had the great fortune of photographing the making of the movie. They allowed me in kind of behind the scenes to shoot still photographs of the making of the movie as a historical record. And so I got to watch it being made. And that was really quite fascinating.
Neat.
Yeah.
I think Greg Stone had a question perhaps, and I maybe saw another hand or two. Greg, did you have a question? No? Just waving at me. Anyone else that had a hand up?
I have a question, Mel.
Yes, Joanne Shaw, welcome to you.
Thank you. When I was a teenager and we visited up there, there was something called moral rearmament that met up there. Can you say something about that? Because I just remember the name, and for some reason my sister sounded very interested in it.
Yeah, and the Moral Rearmament was a group that was created by a gentleman named Frank Buckman between the First and Second World War. And as countries were rearming militarily, his argument was that they should be rearming morally. And so he created this group that had a conference headquarters on Mackinac Island. And that started right after the war. And eventually they built a large complex on the east end of the island that is now basically Mission Point Resort. And as that began to die out, its last manifestation was Mackinac College, which ran for 4 years. It was a college that was really started through the auspices of MRA. And that college ran for 4 years, graduated a class of about 20, and then folded. Rex Humbard bought the property. He ran it as a college for about a year. That folded. And since that time, it has been Mission Point Resort, a resort hotel.
Thank you.
Angie Miller asked if you still live on Mackinac, Phil, and I think I recall you saying you live in Sheboygan, but do you spend your summers on Mackinac Island?
Yes, I have spent all my summers on Mackinac. I actually grew up on Mackinac. My parents had a summer cottage there, so I grew up there, and that's when I started working at the fort when I was 19. And I've been going back every summer and going back again this summer. So really fortunate. I live in Sheboygan year round. In fact, I'm looking at my window right now and I can see Mackinac Island across the Straits of Mackinac, but it's about 15 miles away.
Sweet. Other questions or comments? Brad.
So for those who can't get enough of Fudge or of Phil Porter, I'll refer you to Phil Porter's book on Fudge in Mackinac, which I just checked out is available for purchase on Amazon.
What's the name again, Fred?
I don't, Phil, what's the title of the book, the exact title?
The title is Fudge, Mackinac's Sweet Souvenir. Bradley, I've written 6 or 7 other books that are much more substantial than the book about fudge.
I know, but this is the one we all want to know more.
That's the one you want. It's got a recipe in it.
Right. And I'll ask too, Phil, what's the biggest change that you've seen on the island during your time there?
Just probably development. Since I grew up, there have been dozens and dozens of new homes and businesses built in areas that used to be private property, and it puts some development pressure on Mackinac and on its infrastructure and resources. That's probably the biggest change that I've seen. I would say that.
And if we're one of the lucky ones to be going up to Mackinac this summer, most of us know about the fort. But I know at Mackinac State Historic Parks, you actually provided leadership for a number of things in the area. Can you run down that list for us to give us a sense of what's up there?
Yeah, I would like to encourage you to visit the fort, buy the fort ticket, because it also includes admission to the Mackinac Art Museum, which was first put up in 2010. So it's a museum where we display the artistic creations of Mackinac, from prehistoric Native American pottery through a modern art contest. And it also includes admission to the Biddle House, which now has the Mackinac Native American Museum. Besides that, on the mainland, we have historic Mill Creek Discovery Park and colonial Michela, Mackinac, and Old Mackinac Point Lighthouse. So we're a family of multiple historic sites, but all in the Straits of Mackinac.
And how much time should we leave? How many days should we leave to take in those places?
Oh my gosh, you'd want to have a day on the island and a day on the mainland at least.
Okay. And enough fudge to last you both sides.
Yeah, you're going to need a lot of fudge to do all that stuff.
What a
Any-
delight. Other questions? Yes. I'm looking for hands. Mhm.
We covered chat.
We covered it. Yes. And what a lovely way to spend our lunch hour today, Phil. We are so grateful to you for spending this time with us and preparing this presentation. I can't wait to get up there this summer, but definitely a year from now for our annual church retreat. For those of you that can join us for that, that's coming up a year from now.
Great. Thanks. It's nice to be with you all.
Thank you much, Phil. Much appreciated.
And Brad's got some things to share, so don't leave everybody.
Yes, for those of you who stick around for another minute or two, let me call to your attention June 10th, which will be our one of our next two. Actually, Mel, let's start off by talking about the presentation that's coming up next week, is it?
Yes, I don't have that in front of me, but it's one of the presentations on what to know about assisted living places. It's being done by Justine Bykowski, and it's next Thursday at noon.
Okay. And then the next one that I'll be involved with is on June 10th. And we're going to be wrapping up our lunch and learns for this for 2020 and 2021. It's going to be a presentation on the U of M, but Nichols Arboretum Peony Collection. And the guest presenter is going to be David Mitchner, who's curator at the Mackinac Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum. David has published extensively on the peony collection at U of M. He's written a best-selling book on peonies that was reviewed favorably by the New York Times. And he's right here in our own backyard. The Peony Gardens is probably one of those places you've been any number of times without fully understanding or appreciating how important it is as a collection internationally. So we're going to end our time together this year with a walk through the Peony Gardens together virtually on June 10th. As far as what we have coming up for our trips, which we've been talking about re-energizing for next season, is I want to announce in advance a trip that we have planned for Thursday, November 4th, which is going to be a trip to Detroit to see the immersive Van Gogh exhibit. That has been traveling internationally, has been rave reviewed, and is coming to Detroit. This isn't an exhibition of art like the trip we had planned for last year that was canceled. This is sort of an interactive exhibit where you walk through space. You're actually walking through Van Gogh's paintings that are projected on screens around you. And there's music and lots of light and movement. And if you're in a sunflower painting, you're going to be walking right through the garden. And so that's going to be really unusual and a fantastic experience. We're going to follow it up with lunch at the Detroit Athletic Club, which is going to be a white tablecloth experience. I like to get in one of those for us each year. The church will be providing the bus. We're limited to 35 people on this trip. And I'm going to encourage you to sign up for the trip. Mel, is that available for sign up at this point?
Yes, I've already gotten people sending me that they're intending to go. So we are down from 35. We probably have about 20 spots left.
Okay, well, that's good for something that has so recently been promoted. We're also planning trips for August, September, and October, and I'll announce details of those trips when we meet to talk about the Peony Gardens next month.
Great.
So we'll follow the science on COVID, but we're planning optimistically. We're getting our seniors back on the road, seeing interesting places and doing things together. Looking forward to sharing time with you in person. Mel, what do you want to add?
I just put some things up in the chat bar about the trip to Detroit in November, that it is about a $50 expense, and that is almost solely around the lunch. The tickets to the immersive Van Gogh have been provided for us by a generous donor, and the bus will be paid for by the church. So this the bus will be a 55 passenger, but they will only put 35 on it, being COVID safe, and there's some limitations that they have with the bus company. So just be aware of that it's a different kind of trip. It'll be fantastic and delicious and unique and very good to be together for 35 of us that can do that. So thank you, Brad, for helping to keep our program so energetic and hopeful as we move through this pandemic. I hope that you all have gotten the vaccine. If you've had any problem with that or you need support, our parish nurses are here. Barb Delancey is here. Stacy Michela, I saw, was here earlier. I don't know if they're all still here, but they are here to support you and meet any of the needs. We want to keep Katie Beery in our prayers. She's here with us today. Katie is having some failing health, and we just love you, Katie, and just hold you in our hearts, you and Eldon together, and want you to know how precious you are to us. Gail, there's not a sign up on the website. You just email me for a spot. Sandy Anderson.
I'd like to go back for a second to Mackinac Island. I just remembered that, well, the road around the perimeter that people like to bicycle around, it's 8 miles long, is called, it has a number, it's like M85. It was damaged significantly in the high water of 2018 or 19, I can't remember which. And although we were there last September, even though it was during COVID, and we were able to bicycle all the way around, although some sections were gravel, so temporary fixes. But this summer, they're going to repair in a major way the broken parts of the road, so people won't be able to bicycle the entire perimeter this year.
All right, good to know. Thanks for the heads up about that. And Stacy and Barb, is there anything that you all would like to add while we have all our fine people here? Barb or Stacy?
I will just say hi to everybody, and yes, if anybody needs any assistance, if folks are still looking with help with getting vaccinated, Barb and I definitely will be able to help you with that. And also Linda Strodman, who's been amazing and has developed some really wonderful connections. And I guess, Barb and I, just going forward as things slowly start to open up, we're just really very supportive of, the church at doing things, following, as Brad said, watching the CDC reports and being very, very careful as we move forward, but also very optimistic because we're moving in a right direction, which is wonderful. So, and it's so great to be here with all of you today.
Thanks, Stacy. Barb? Great.
Sounds great. Great to see you all.
It is great to see you all. Mary is here. Mary, you came here late. I did record this presentation, which you've missed, but I will make it available to you and to a few others to watch it. Would you like to make a comment?
I just you were telling people to sign up for something. What was it you were asking them to sign up for?
Well, we were speaking about the vaccines, and then we were talking about a trip that we're taking to the Detroit Immersive Van Gogh, which you already know about, and I have you on that list. So that's
Okay,
what
so
we're talking
I'm
about.
already gonna be on that list. Perfect.
Yes. And
Okay.
you'll watch the video and hear things that you missed today.
Thank you. Thank you. So sorry it took me so long to
Okay.
get here.
It's really great to see some new faces here today. Brad and I thank you. Stacy and Barb also thank you for joining us. Hope that you had a good lunch and a good time with us, and may God bless you and keep you. Everyone be well and stay in touch with us, okay?
Mel,
Thank
thank you for your support of these programs.
Absolutely. Happy to. Love it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See ya.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Linda.
Bye.
Thanks to the Friends of Brad.
Yep.
Mm.
There we go. We're wiping out here. Let's see how do we get out of